how's the volume on this? It's good? All right, I'm just waiting for Dave. The technical time is 12:59, but that clock says it's 1:01. So once Dave gets here, we'll get started. You all know what to do when the alarm goes off, right? Very good. Very good. Do. Hopefully. Oh, you have a joke? Oh, it's too late now. I really need to get like a joke. So if anybody wants to email me their favorite joke, I would love to start making up a joke collection. I don't have any jokes. Yeah. Yes. Oh, good. Yeah, add me to the list. All right, here we go. Here's the man of the hour. Well, I was just waiting for you. That's the respectful thing to do. All right, everyone. So I think we all know why we're here today. We're going to get started. Before we get started, I just want to kind of lay the expectations out of the meeting. So the meeting that we're having today is roughly 3 months after we had the last one. So we did this in December, and it is our plan to do this every quarter. Okay, so once a quarter, so roughly every 3 months. Our intention is to use the same format, okay, or similar format. So some of you didn't want to take the paper because you said you already had it. We're always going to use the same format so you know what you're looking at, but we'll make notes to updates, okay? So there's more information in this one than there was last time. And in addition, some of the staging has changed. So Dave is going to take us through first to lay the land on what we're talking about with the 2025 financing, which is all we're going to talk about today. We're just going to talk about the 2025 financing primarily until we get to the third slide. Then we're going to talk about the potential bigger picture. But the focus today is going to be on where we are for 2025 financing because those numbers are coming together. Do you prefer to take questions as we go or stop after each section?
I can take questions after I've done mine.
Okay. Yeah. All right, good. So that's what we'll do. All right, so Dave is going to take us through this diagram, which doesn't have the circles on it because I had to write the circles in at my desk. I couldn't edit it. But Dave's going to take us through the total scope of the 2025 financing and project, and then let you know that the current phasing, which has changed a little bit. Sir?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's the Michelle and Dave show again. So a little bit of a change. I mean, this is we've had a couple of recent meetings with Wolson, really getting into some of the more of the details around the logistics of how we're going to phase construction. And that for me is pretty exciting because then you start to think about how you move materials onto the site and where that intersects with residents walking or where that doesn't intersect, how you try and avoid that from happening. So we're really getting into some of the details. One of the things we changed was that on information from Phil Cavello, he said, if you build my fast casual kitchen first, that's the kitchen that will replace the existing pub. He said, I can deliver a lot of the food program out of that kitchen while we renovate the existing kitchen. So that was great information because one of the things we're trying to avoid is having a kitchen in a truck in the car park. And you can imagine, the hassle that is bringing food inside because, of course, it's not just independent living, but also delivering to the health centre and so on. So that's one of the things. We'll still need support activities in the car park. For example, we'll probably need refrigeration in the car park for a period of time while we build this first phase. But the first phase is this lime green, and it involves the new fast casual kitchen, the existing main dining space. Thanks, Michelle. And it's also interesting because we will actually build a sheetrock wall around that whole area while we're in construction, once again to separate the dust and the noise from where residents are walking down the corridor and using adjacent spaces. So that's phase one. And then phase two, we have that kitchen up and running. Phil is so happy because he's got a brand new kitchen. And then we start in the main kitchen. And that involves a lot of things like we're replacing the entire floor in there. So you can imagine, logistically, it's better that we don't split that kitchen into two halves. We're doing it all in one go. There'll be some work above the ceiling in there as well. So that's the next phase. And part of that phase too is marketing and the bathrooms. What happens? So that's the renovation of the existing bathrooms that are down this hall, replacing all the fixtures and finishes in there, and then marketing. Now, marketing is here. So this is the new discovery room and the associated marketing offices. The good thing about that is that we maintain the discovery room, the existing discovery room, through that process, so the marketing department is able to hold public meeting or hold meetings with prospective residents in the existing discovery room. Now, because we have to build an addition here and the foundation, even though this is written as a later phase, it actually starts at the same time as phase one. And that's because we have to build a foundation and do the excavation out there. And so you can imagine that also requires a fence that will include part of the car park to that end, to the west of that building, because we need to have deliveries brought in there and equipment and so on. And so that'll be fenced off. And of course, the impact there is that this exit from the building will also be impacted and will actually close off. There'll be a wall here. It means you can still utilize the swimming pool, the existing pack, and all those spaces. But that exit from the building at that end of the building will be closed off, and you'll see action there right from early on in this phase. But what happens is that once they have completed the kitchen and the marketing and bathrooms, then they hope that the envelope will be done here and the trades can move over to doing the wellness addition. And also we've got the salon in there, which will happen after the kitchen. And then we swing back to the Main Street, and that actually includes concierge as well. It's not colored here, but that, because it's an associated space, concierge will be renovated as well and greatly improved in terms of its management of things like packages and so on. So that's really our phasing. Part of that last phase is also the mail room and the bank happen right at the tail end. We do the Main Street, and then we do the bank and the post office. So that's it for phasing. Yeah, we had a couple meetings, which was really useful because it highlighted a couple of things that I hadn't thought of. Really, access for people when that entrance to the building at I guess that's the southwest end, is going to be closed, talking about how we move people around, and also some of the things to do with, where we'll be blocking off, building walls, dust walls, and, management of people. So we've met a couple of times. We don't think we need to have a meeting for a little while. We're going to check in with each other. But as we get more information from Wilson about some of these things where I want input from the focus group, we'll reconvene and take input at that point. But I actually feel that Wilson's been very proactive in their understanding of, especially things like HVAC, where you can get dust moving through the HVAC from one occupied space to a construction space, or construction space to the occupied space. They're way ahead on understanding what they need to do in those terms, and very proactive around understanding where permanent wall or they're temporary walls, but they're real sheetrock framed walls, and where they need to also go up to not just the ceiling, because of course air moves above the ceiling, but up to the underside of the roof deck. So any questions?
It seems to me you need an exit from the building at the end of the corridor, past the exercise room, past the pool. It seems should be an exit where that yellow is. You said you're closing off an exit.
Yeah, it's true. And what we are constructing a new exit to the building up there. You see that door?
But that's way around
a new exit.
And that whole area.
It's possible during that period that we will construct a temporary exit. I mean, the salon is here at the moment. We may need to create an exit through here. They're talking about shutting this off at this point, but we can't go through here because this will be a construction site, so we can't take you through. Yeah, but all this does require a plan in order to make sure that we don't have dead end corridors, to your point.
And where is the art studio gone?
Well, eventually the art studio will be down here. Yep.
So one of the things you all have to keep in mind that Dave didn't mention in this section is, you all remember we spent an extensive period of time asking you to help us figure out how we were going to clear out south storage downstairs. A lot of the activities that currently happen in this room, in the art studio and other places, are going to move down to that space, which is going to be renovated enough so that lighting is appropriate and it's temperature controlled and attractive and so forth.
And I'll have carpet on the floor and
carpet on the floor and everything. So
and that space may actually be built out more than once.
Yeah.
We may put up a temporary wall, and then as our needs change, take that down and divide it into 3 spaces or whatever we need. But that's what that space at the south storage is designed for.
Right. And that's accessible by the elevator by the library. So obviously we're going to be under construction. So there's going to be things that are going to get disrupted. So what we're trying to do is make sure that nothing is getting canceled. That's the goal. Obviously, we're not renovating the pool in this phase. And when we do the pool renovation, it's going to be the deck. It's not the pool itself. We're hoping that's going to be rather quick. But everything else should just be able to be moved. And that's what the logistics focus group of the residents. Is anybody in here on the logistics focus group? Okay, a few of you. That's really helpful to have the residents there and providing your insight and concerns and so forth. I'm just going to work my way back and forth from the front to the back.
When the new salon goes in, this pack will be a third smaller. Then, I see. This is the art studio.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep.
Did you have a question, Ed?
That's that exit is for people who are using wheelchairs and other types of assistance. The next door up is up on quite a high hill, and it's all stairs. It is not a usable thing for anybody with a wheelchair unless you design it such that the path comes back over to that lower part. So
if you come up the entrance to, I wish I had one of those clicker things, but when you come up to this door, the grade is there. So you're coming up there anyway. That door is ADA compliant for a wheelchair. So when you go outside today, go out this door and take a right. You will loop around to that south side door, and that is graded ADA compliant. The south wing entrance, you can't really,
Come on there.
he's not that tall. But there's an exit at the pool. So I wouldn't get too caught up in these kinds of things. Don't forget, there's double doors at the pool. So if you're coming in, I mean, you're really talking about people that are coming like from the cottages. Well, I mean, they're. If you're in the back, or if you're at the pool. So it's really important for everyone here to understand that the architects and engineers that we have are not going to design anything that is not building code compliant, and that means fire code. So they're going to guide us in terms of what has to happen. And just so everybody's clear, Dave is only talking about temporary closure. There is actually an exit, a full exit right here in the plan. So that's going to be there. So we're just talking about temporarily during construction.
Yeah, so there's an exit. Sorry, I should have said that what I'm talking about. So this is the exit, the new exit from the building there. So it's through an airlock, a vestibule. So you'll be able, and the path actually comes around here so that, as Michelle said, it will be ADA accessible, and you can come in here and then come down to this, access this end of the building. So the long-term solution is there will be an exit at that end of the building. It's just during construction, we need to, manage people in a different way.
Same thing when we were filming. This whole corridor was all shut off the whole time during filming. We couldn't be down here. But we rerouted people down that same hallway where they made that fake bathroom, and it was just fine. So, okay, let's go to the next question. Paul?
Two questions. What is the timetable for the 2 dining rooms completion, roughly?
I would say it's about 7 months from when we start.
Okay.
So-
And second is, where's Gretchen's office going to go?
I don't have an answer for that. Do you remember?
Yes, it's in
Yeah.
the new admin suite.
Oh, yes. So
It's actually in here. So we're adding a whole section in the 2028 financing. This whole admin suite is coming out another whole section of offices. So this is all of resident services, HR, finance, concierge, all of that comes back into here now. That's not till 2028 financing. Yeah, none of the white gets touched until the 2028 financing. So the only thing there, I mean, there's a portion, so that office that Gretchen is in right now will temporarily relocate to what was Angel's office. But eventually, because that office is vacant right now, eventually it'll all come into here. All of the offices are going to be right in this suite. I'll go to Lionel next.
Now, it's my understanding that the basement is going to be used temporarily for activities that will be, that can't be done upstairs because of construction. And that after the construction is done, the basement then will be used for other things. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we're still figuring that out. We're very
Okay.
focused on the construction phase at the
And
moment.
I spoke to you about the pottery, putting in a pottery studio in the basement. So the plumbing that is necessary for that, if you're going to do that after the construction is done up here and the basement is no longer needed for what it was used for, the plumbing has to be put in.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying,
So
but
the plumbing should be put in while everything is open rather than afterwards tear
yeah, so
everything out.
what we're doing is at the moment trying to figure out just what the space requirements for that would be and how viable that is and exactly where that might go.
Okay.
Yeah, but I hear you. It needs to be part of this phase of construction rather than coming in and doing it later. Yep,
Yeah, because it'll be much more expensive later.
it would. Yep. And I mean, that's part of our job throughout this process is identifying the things that, even things that may need changing out in the next 2 or 3 years afterwards. We're trying to identify those things and saying, let's do that upgrade now. Let's take care of it as part of the construction rather than leave it and then, redo it.
I'd like to ask more information about the art room, its demise and its resurrection. Is it going to temporarily be in the basement? And then is it going to be revived and come back upstairs again? Where and when?
So at the moment, this is the existing salon, right? So when the salon is completed here, this can be used as an art room. Now, it will be probably pretty much a similar size, a little bit smaller than what the art room is at the moment. But then, of course, in the second phase, in the 2028 construction, it'll be greatly enlarged and improved.
Okay.
So
So
that's the timing.
temporarily, there'll be a place as is, and then in 3 years, it will be improved.
Yeah,
But
that's
okay,
right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As I said, I mean, all of the logistical discussions have focused on that we will be moving some things, but we will not be stopping any services. So we're very committed to making sure that everything that's happening now can happen during construction and beyond, if not more. So all of the focus groups have been instrumental in making sure that we understand what's a priority. Many of the residents in this room are on any variety of focus groups, and the logistics focus group is really ramping up their activity.
There have been many or several suggestions on alternate power sources here. And one of the suggestions is solar collectors. But there's a hesitancy to put it in because, quote, the wiring is going to be too expensive to take it from the roof on the north wing and take it to where the control panels. Here's everything is open. You could stick it in and wouldn't even see the cost of it.
So the engineers are looking at any opportunities that we have to create renewable energy sources with any of the new construction. To your point, though, we're not opening up anything except for in the central area here. This is where stuff is going to be opened up. We're not touching anything in north or central or south until the 2028 financing. So currently, their task is to where we have new construction, if there are renewable energy sources that can be added, they will be bringing that to us for consideration. And of course, we always continue to reevaluate the technology for renewable energy, but that's a conversation for another day. I think I saw another hand. Yeah, I mean, so we're not touching the north wing until the second financing. So I'm actually optimistic that by the time 2028 or 2029 comes, there's going to be much better solar technology that will be able to capture solar from all of the roofs into batteries. Yeah, I can't speak to that right now, but the engineers are focused on renewable energy.
I see on our sheets that the yellow is constructed before that orange, which is the salon. Does that mean we have access to the art studio, which is the orange, during construction of the fitness, which is yellow?
I expect so. We still need to refine that, but as you can see, the addition doesn't really impact that room, and we actually have a construction document that has this phasing on it that shows that the cutoff, the closure of the corridor is down here, so you'd still be able to access that.
We also have doors that are in that art room.
Yes.
For the outdoors. Would they be available for use?
To go outside?
Yes.
No, I expect that outside those windows will probably be deemed a construction zone. So not safe. Yeah. You have to give them a little bit of breathing room around where they're constructing.
If residents are going to use the basement for anything, what about bathroom facilities?
Yeah, that's a good point, because that was raised in the logistics group too, and it is an issue. I mean, I think we'd have to rely on the bathroom that's outside the health centre. You know, you'd come up in the elevator. I'm not sure that we can put temporary bathrooms downstairs. I don't think that would be feasible.
We can talk about that, because I think that there are bathrooms that housekeeping uses, aren't there?
Yeah, there's one.
By the locker room.
Yeah, there's one.
So there is a set of restrooms downstairs. So we'll look at that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right, I think we'll move on to the financing section, and then we'll continue to take questions on either topic. So if you want to move to the second page. Thanks, Dave. All right, so in the first presentation, we didn't include this level of detail, and questions that arose after the meeting indicated to me that we probably should going forward. So I just want to start this by reminding everyone exactly why we're doing what we're doing in the way that we're doing it, okay? We currently have existing debt capacity at Woodland Pond of a certain amount of money based on our current financial position and the strength of our financial metrics. Oh, yeah, David, could you just advance this to the numbers? I've used this anecdote in some of the meetings that I've been in, but just to kind of give you the sense of it, think of it exactly like a homeowner having access to either equity in their home or good credit or both. Okay, so at this point, Woodland Pond has generated enough debt capacity, which is the equivalent of a homeowner's equity, and our financials are strong enough to be able to access favorable rates in the market to allow us to borrow a certain amount right now without adding any additional revenue streams or cutting any expenses. Okay, so we've moved ourselves over the last 15 years into a position that without creating any additional revenue generating units, based on our current book of business, based on our track record, based on our financial position, that the bondholders feel that we have a certain amount of debt capacity and will still allow us to meet our debt covenant requirements. I don't want to get into the details on that. It's very detailed, but we have certain levels of financing that we need to maintain to be in compliance with our bond covenants. And that's very similar, again, to a mortgage. You have certain things under a mortgage that you have to do, like maintain insurance, make your payments, blah, blah, blah. We have to do the similar kinds of things. So because we have projects that we need to advance now, we are going to take advantage of our existing debt capacity to do the projects that we're talking about now. There are two components to the 2025 financing. One is what I've referred to as now, like now, and I've defined it on the front of this. That is the items that we're going to touch and renovate on campus from proceeds of this debt financing. And that's what we're going to talk about on page 2. The balance of the money that we're borrowing is going to be applied to potential land acquisition for an expansion, design fees as we continue design work on a possible expansion, permitting costs of wetland studies, and a variety of things. So we are borrowing more in 2023 or 2025 than what's listed here. But what's listed here is the cost specific to the actual construction that you're going to see on campus. Everything that we're borrowing in 2025 is what we can afford. Okay, there's actually a little bit more that we can afford by a couple $1 million, but we're not going to touch that. So we're not doing the whole project now, renovation and expansion, because we don't have debt capacity for $120 million. We have debt capacity for $23 or $25 million. And we'll get into that in a minute. But I just want to make sure everybody's clear. What we're borrowing now is based on what we can currently afford, based on the bank metrics, the bondholder metrics, the New York State Department of Financial Services financing requirements, et cetera, without adding any new revenue generating units. Does anyone have any questions about that before I move on to how it's going to get diced up? Is that somewhat clear to everybody? Can you just give Paul Farr just the mic, please? The total amount currently is 23 million. We have capacity for 25 plus. And actually that might improve a bit, but what we've asked the Department of Financial Services for approval on, and all of the authorities is 23 million. Are there any other questions on that financing aspect? Dave, Mr. LaPerche.
Is there any consideration, considering the amount of construction and inconvenience that will be placed on the residents here, for lowering the service fee?
So that hasn't been discussed. It's not typical to have that happen during renovation.
I beg to differ.
I'm just saying that's not typical in the industry to have that happen. And that's predicated on the fact that we don't anticipate any interruption or availability of services. Obviously, if something changes, and I mean, certainly we can reconsider that. I think it would be difficult to quantify what the right number would be, and I'd welcome any suggestions, but obviously we need to keep revenue flowing during this construction phase. And again, we are doing what we're doing in the way that we're doing it to ensure that you have everything that you have today throughout the course of that construction, even if it's done in a little bit of a different way. If, of course, at any time there's something significant that's part of your contract that we cannot provide, absolutely, we will owe you something. We have a certain number of things that we owe you under the contract. And if at any time we can't provide that, there has to be some sort of a credit back for that. Okay, Ina has a question, and then we've got one in the back.
Of the current money designated, what is the potential cost overruns for changes and so on?
I'm going to go through that in detail. I'm going to go through this whole document in detail. Right now, I'm just talking about the basic financing provisions. Lloyd, did you have a question? Okay, does anybody have any other questions on what I just indicated? So for those that have questioned, why are we borrowing what we're borrowing now? It's because this is what we can comfortably afford and still meet the requirements of our bond covenants and the Department of Financial Services statutory requirements, okay, of which we're beholden. So of the 23 million that's going to be borrowed, 13 or 14 million dollars of that is going directly to the renovations on campus. And that is what is described here. I'm going to go down this in order. So direct construction costs right now are projected at $9,057,000. And I have an asterisk there that indicates to you that that includes a contractor held contingency. Okay, you're going to hear the word contingency said 3 times today. Well, I may say it more than 3 times, but there's contingency held in 3 places in these numbers. One area where contingency is held is the contractor contingency included in those direct construction costs. And when we think about what is a direct construction cost, this is the actual cost to provide the labor and materials to perform the actual construction, the banging of the nails, the hanging of the new fixtures and all that jazz. The next line is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And right now that's anticipated at $975,000. And that's exactly what it sounds as described. And so obviously this seems like a big number. But when you think about the fact that every chair that we have in the dining room is a $600 chair, or it was in 2007 when they were ordered, those chairs are over $1,300 a piece now. Things are a lot more expensive, I think, than a lot of people realize. And that's just the way that these things cost. Everything that we do in these projects, with the exception of these kinds of things, it's all custom built. The furniture is all custom built. It's all fabricated. So yes, it's expensive, but this is the cost of these kinds of things. It is very similar to what it was plus inflation. Owner held direct construction contingency. So this is the second place I'm mentioning contingency. This is our contingency just related to direct construction that we're currently projecting. Okay, so this is above and beyond what the contractor is holding. This is our contingency directly related to construction contingency. I'm going to stop there because it just occurred to me it's very important for you to understand something about the contract pricing. Okay, so there are two different ways that you can go into a construction contract. One is based on an estimate, and then you kind of watch this as it goes, and the risk is carried mainly by the owner in that case, the risk of the cost going out of control because you've based it on an estimate. There's a lot of unknowns, et cetera. The other type of contract you can go into is called a guaranteed maximum price contract. And in that case, the risk goes to the construction manager. And I know this is getting into detail. I'm going to go slow and ask if people have questions, but we are going into a guaranteed maximum price contract. And what that means is that the architects and engineers have attested to the fact that they've gotten our plans to 90% completion or more, and that those have then been handed over to the construction manager. The construction manager then takes that set of documents, which is called the construction CDs, construction design documents, out to their subs. Okay, because yes, the construction manager provides some labor on certain things, but in a lot of cases, they're subbing the work out. Electrical, plumbing, millwork, etc. So they take that construction document set, which is 90% or more complete, to their subs. The subs come back and say, okay, we can do this for, let's say, they say they're going to be able to do it for $8.5 million altogether. Okay? We vet that number. Our developer looks at it. This is also an open bidding process. That's very important for you all to know. So we're going to see every single sub that has bid for every trade, and we're going to have a say in who gets picked, and we're going to know if they were close to each other. So if the ultimate electrical contractor that we select is within the ballpark of what the others that bid are, that gives us good comfort. But we've been through construction. Dave, this has been his career doing this. Our developers, this is what they do. So anyway, we all come back to the table. The builder, construction manager comes back and says, okay, the guaranteed maximum price that we are willing to put on this is $9 million, okay, based on these documents. And we say, okay. From there, the only thing that can impact our cost is something unanticipated. Okay, there's a phrase that's called reasonably inferable. If something is deemed to have been reasonably inferable at the 90% documents, then it's on the builder. If there's a change in scope, it's generally on the owner because it was not reasonably inferable, right? So, simple example. Let's say we're building a new room and the room has lights in it, okay? And 90% has been designed. They've told you exactly what the electrical of the walls needs to be, what fixtures are going to be there, et cetera, okay? But the document doesn't show a light switch. It's reasonably inferable for a construction manager to know that that room needs a light switch, okay? If they did not pick that up when they gave us the GMP, that's on them because that's reasonably inferable. You can only apply the reasonably inferable complex, though, if you've gotten the documents to 90%. So it's very important that everyone is confident at the time of the negotiation that those documents are at 90% or better, because from there, it's more difficult to reasonably infer what you're not seeing. Okay, so this means that the risk to Woodland Pond, once we enter into the negotiated contract, is only going to be at risk for those things that were not reasonably inferable or where the scope has changed. One of the things that is working to our benefit in this regard is not only do we have the as-built documents for the existing building, which tells you what's in the walls, the architects already have that, they know what's there. We also paid to have the ceilings and the plenum spaces, which is what's above the ceilings, all scanned by a special technology scanning system. This was done by the architects, or they brought a sub in to do it, so that they wanted to make sure that, because all of the pipes and everything are up in the ceilings. You just have like electrical runs in the walls, but all of the conduits, if you were ever to open any of these up, especially in the hallways, it's just tons of pipes. So we have the as-built documents, but we really wanted to make sure that the existing condition matched the as-built, because we don't want any surprises, and neither does anybody that's going into the GMP. So we have spent money in advance to make sure that we're all working with the most appropriate, most current set of numbers, and then we all come to the GMP and we negotiate it. The reason I share that with you is because that very first line right now is projected. By the time we come back to the next meeting, the first number is going to be a GMP number. That is going to be the negotiated firm number for the contract. It's not going to be an estimate. And we will be able to tell you exactly how much contingency is being carried by the contractor, because we're going to have negotiated the GMP by the next time we meet. Is that, I know it's a lot of detail. Questions on that? Do you want to circle the mic, please?
I don't see the word contractor contingency. Is that in the very first line?
It's in the first line, and then it's denoted on the bottom of your page with an asterisk.
In terms of the cost of materials, it's going to be affected by the new tariffs. What does the contractor do in that situation? Is he locked into the price?
So there are different ways that this gets handled. Right now, the current guidance, and Dave just actually attended a development conference specifically related to senior living development, and this was a topic that was discussed. Do you want to just share a bit? Here, you can take my mic.
Yeah. So it's straddling between, allowing for changes in the increase in materials and not giving the contractor a free pass. If you held them to their price, then right at the very start, they'll just add in percentages, right? And they'll add in percentages. The what if, everything goes up by 25% or 45%, and then you would end up paying much more. What we want to do, this is called, as Michelle was saying, this is open book. We get to see all the subcontractors' pricing and have a full understanding of where that's come from. So we will have clauses in our contract that allow for that. They need to document it and show us where those increases are. So it's not just giving them a free hand to increase as much as they want.
I assume that the contractor will have a finish date. And the question is, if he exceeds the finish date, if he doesn't finish on time, are there penalties?
Yeah. So you're reading our mind, because Michelle and I had these conversations this morning, and you're right. And I'm not clear on what our clause is, but that's pretty standard to do that, to have that penalty. She was also asking whether they get a bonus if they complete early. I would say no. But so these are the conversations that we're having, and that will be in our contract.
I was on the grand jury that investigated the Ulster County Jail, where it was absolutely insane
I'm sensitive to the time, but I feel like I have to tell my sob story. This poor team of ours is just being browbeaten by me on basically a daily basis because I have a trauma response to everything we're talking about right now. Because, as many of you know, the original construction went over budget by $7 million and was delayed by almost a year. The health center additionally was a year beyond that. And there's nobody in this room that was involved in any of that until the very last months. So the horse was already out of the barn, and the people that were responsible for that ultimately were sued by Woodland Pond. The developer was sued, the engineer and the architect were sued, and all of the people that had been at the owner's table at that point had walked away. So it was me that spent 5 years in arbitration with the developer and actually in a jury trial with the architect and engineer. And many of the issues that arose were related to the completion of the documents not being at 90% when we negotiated the GMP, change orders that shouldn't have pushed through because they weren't scope changes, liquidated damages, shared savings buyouts. So these are all things that to me are triggering like a PTSD response. Because it cost Woodland Pond millions and millions of dollars in trouble and me 5 years of time that was very stressful, you know? And so they've been very gracious, but I've asked that all of these things get buttoned up very tightly because we have experienced it here. I was here and I do not ever want to see it happen again. But there will be provisions to allow for if there are any inflationary issues that couldn't have been anticipated. I also think that the tariff question is going to be settled out a bit within the next 3 months. It's very chaotic right now. I think in 3 months' time, we'll have a better idea of where this is going to land. That's not to say, though, I don't know if any of you are aware of this, but the day that the tariffs were announced, before a single tariff was applied, the price of aluminum in the commodities market went up 8%. So some of it's real and some of it's not. And so we're just going to have to contend with it and make sure that there's enough protection for Woodland Pond. But it's important for you all to know that when the payment applications come in, there's 2 protections for Woodland Pond in addition to the contracts. Number one, only the architect can sign off on the payment application. So it's not up to Woodland Pond whether it's right. We'll be in the room, but they're the ones that vet and make sure that based on the market conditions and based on the design documents and so forth, that they feel that it's payable. And the second thing that this project requires, which we haven't gotten to this line yet, but see this line right here, this big number? That's us paying a bank monitor throughout the duration of construction, which is a firm that specializes in overseeing construction from a third-party perspective to protect the bank, or in this case, bondholders' investment. So it's nobody that's existing on the design team now. We have to pay them to be here. And all they're looking at is progress to schedule and progress versus budget, because the bondholders want that money protected. We have to pay for it, but there is a lot of protection on this process. It's very important for everyone to understand that, and we'll continue to talk about that as time goes on.
This is also one of the reasons why we had Wilson come in as a construction manager right early in the design process, because what that does is they've been in all our design meetings. They sit there, they don't say a lot, but what it means is that they understand the process. And they're there to ask the architects, oh, what do you mean by this? What about this? Should this be in scope? Should this not be in scope? So they're there to ask all the questions. Often when you're bidding to several construction companies, their first look is when they get the drawings, right? When they get the construction documents. Well, Wilson have already been in the room for 6 months, and they've been part of that conversation all the way through. And that's the reason for doing it, because we already have it's not just them being there, a real relationship between us and Wilson, and then them and the architects as well. So it really is a partnership. There shouldn't be, and this should guarantee any surprises.
question?
Yeah, the contractor and the subcontractors, are they local firms?
As much as possible. It's a tough one because actually when we were talking to all the GCs, when we interviewed them, that was one of the top things, that was one of the top challenges. This area in particular is very difficult to get labor to come to. This area in particular, the Hudson Valley, is hard to get skilled labor. It's a product of our industry at the moment and the amount of building that's happening here. But it's also, it's easier in New York City and New Jersey because of the massive populations they have there. So as much as possible, we actually have subcontractors that work on our building regularly that will be putting in bids, but there will be bidders from adjoining counties as well and further afield who will be bidding on different trades.
Right. So one of the things the way it works in New York State, if you want to access tax exempt bonds, which is what we are doing, you have to do it through a financing authority. And it's basically just an organization that has been granted authority by New York State to be a conduit for money to flow and to verify that we qualify for tax exempt bonding. Our financing authority is the Ulster County Capital Resources Corp. And one of the provisions of their allowing us to do the tax exempt debt is to attempt best efforts to accomplish 75% local labor. And they define local labor as being from Ulster County or any contiguous county to Ulster County, including Dutchess County, even though it's across the river. But basically, each of our adjacent counties is what they consider local for the definition of this, and they will actually be monitoring it. So what we understand is that on a monthly basis, we are going to have to provide payroll records to them based on the zip codes of the labor force that's here to verify how close we are to that 75% requirement. If you're interested in seeing that, it's on their website. It's clearly and publicly delineated. So that is one of the conditions of the financing authority that we're using in particular. There will be obviously allowances, for example, if there's a specific trade that just isn't, widely available here, and we'll work through that with them, but that is the goal.
It seems as if you've taken all the reasonable possibilities into account, but I've yet to hear anything that would describe what the situation would be if any of the contractors or subs were to declare bankruptcy.
So we don't pay anyone in advance. So there's no prepayment of anything. So our money is not at risk in that way. The way the financing works is when we close on the financing, the $23 million will be put into escrow accounts with our bond trustee. We do not get access to the money immediately. Actually, we don't get access to the money at all. The trustee holds all of the proceeds of the funds, and they only release the funds to the payees with the approval of the architect and the construction monitor. So that's an important point. We will never pay anybody in advance, and we will never release any funds. No money comes to Woodland Pond, and it doesn't get released from here. It's held with our trustee. And then they only release when all of the conditions under the contract with a particular contractor or sub are met. In terms of what happens to the actual labor, if somebody goes bankrupt or belly up or something, then we have to go back to the drawing board. We've got to pick a new sub.
Yeah, but also Wolson, our construction manager, has a very strict vetting process for all the subs that in order for them to be selected. And that includes looking at their financials and making sure that they're healthy.
Right. Yeah. And so, of course, as part of these soft costs, and I'm going to get into those in a second, you've got fidelity bonds, you've got builder's risk insurance, and all kinds of things in addition to what we're talking about now to protect for some of the uncertainties. And I do see a lot of people falling asleep, so I'm going to try to just go through this quickly. So let me get my paper out. The So we talked about the direct costs and the up to the 10,343,000. Let's keep going. Construction administration and bank monitoring for 963,000. That is two things. That is the bank monitor that we will have to hire. That will be the fifth wheel in the room, overlooking us and questioning us in every way. They will provide us a report after every single meeting to let us know where they think we might be behind schedule, things that they are not satisfied with, et cetera. It's certainly oversight, but it's expensive. And the other thing that's in that 963 is what's called construction administration. And that is the cost to pay the architect, engineer, interior design firm, their costs as we continue to go through this construction. That's not considered indirect construction, but obviously it has to be paid. They need to be here all the way through. We are holding a project held contingency. So this is, we have a direct construction contingency that we're holding of 312, and then we have our own project contingency for anything else of 225. Again, this is on top of whatever contingency the contract is going to hold. Then there are two things that everybody hates, but they're the necessary cost of doing business. Dave, if you just want to scroll down a bit. The cost of issuance on a debt issue of this size is $1,065,000. That's, think about it as like a mortgage origination fee. So these are the fees that go, it's primarily legal fees, frankly. So Dave and I have a working group call on finances every couple weeks. Every single person in the room or every entity in the room has an attorney, and Woodland Pond pays all the costs for that. So the trustees have an attorney, the bondholders have an attorney, the Ulster County Resources Corp has an attorney, Woodland Pond has 3. So when you see that line, cost of issuance, it's primarily legal fees. No, it's not minimum. It's definitely more than prevailing wage. And ironically, the attorneys don't have to be local. They don't fall into that 75% labor, of course, right? And then the last thing here, this is a requirement of any bond offerings that happen with any kind of not-for-profits, but particularly in senior living. So right off the bat, of the $23 million that we're going to be borrowing, $1,351,000 goes into a bank account that's called the Debt Service Reserve Fund. And what you can think of that as is the very last interest and principal payment due on the debt, just like last month's rent. So like when you have to get an apartment, you have to pay first month's rent and last month's rent. That's our equivalent of last month's rent on the debt that we're borrowing. That just goes into the bank and it stays there. We earn interest on it or investment income. We get to keep the investment income, but otherwise we don't get to touch the principal and it'll just sit there, but it has to be pre-funded. So that's the direct costs related, direct and indirect costs related to the project. Now, I said we're borrowing $23 million. The balance of the difference is roughly $5 million in additional design fees related to getting us to full design for the satellite campus. So that's all the engineering, all of the architecture, and that's to do the design work for the health center, the independent living corridors, and the entire 60 to 70 unit satellite campus. It also includes $2.5 million for acquiring land. It includes additional soft costs and contingencies, but that's what the bulk of that is made up with additional design fees and purchasing the land. That money theoretically could be allocated to other things, and we will work through that. So what I would invite you to do is, as we have these quarterly meetings, what my intention is to present this column as the prior, and then each update, you'll see what the new number is by category. So you'll be able to see if these have changed, and then we'll talk through why have these changed, okay? The last thing I just want to note, this may be surprising to everyone. This was surprising to me last week. We had done a preliminary bond sizing, which is basically tells you how much is this going to cost over the course of the repayment schedule and so forth. the interest rates that were preliminarily used for that were in excess of 7%. The rates have come down by 150 basis points, which is 1.5%, on this type of borrowing. And so just with that update, and the fact that we can access those favorable rates now, that saves $9 million over the course of the project in interest. So time right now is working in our favor. We will see how that all lands, but I want to continue to keep everyone updated. The Finance Review Committee is getting these details on a more granular basis every month. Let's go to any last questions. Okay, we've got a couple here. Dave, could you just pass the mic? We'll go through that in a second.
I have two. First of all, with the bonds and the fluctuating rate, are we going to lock into a rate, or if it goes down, can we take the lower rate or as opposed to upper?
So we are entering into fixed rate debt, which means we're agreeing to pay the rate that we pay. And that could be good for us or it could be bad for us, but it eliminates our risk, our rate risk. So it's always favorable to have a fixed rate, but this current deal does allow for us to enter into what's called an interest rate swap or some kind of a hedge, other hedge transaction. That's way too complicated for this room, but basically you can buy into a contract for a portion of your debt repayment to swap your rate. So you may think the market's going to go down, the rate's going to go down, and you try to lock in at that. Then you're locked into that new rate. And then if the market goes haywire, then you're screwed. We did that the first time around too. And that was $2 million deficit to us. So we're probably just going to stick with where we are. But we'll let you know.
The second question, does any money of all of this go to the village or the town?
So we currently have an existing pilot agreement, which is a payment in lieu of taxes. So I know that there's a supposition or some kind of rumor that Woodland Pond doesn't pay anything towards the local municipalities, and it's abjectly false. We are not on the tax rolls per se, but when we opened, we entered into a 20-year fixed pilot agreement, which tells the village, town, school district, fire department, and county that we are going to pay them a set amount every year. Okay, that is a scheduled amount. They're due in the first quarter of the year. The school district gets the largest payment. Our current pilot is $1.1 million annually, and half of that goes to school district, and then the others get a portion, from there. The pilot goes up by $50,000 every year. So by the time it's done, it's closer to like $1.3 million or $1.4 million. And the reason I don't have it memorized, number one, but number two, there are certain years within that 20-year period that we pre-negotiated giving the police department and the ambulance company additional funds to replace apparatus. So there are some years that it fluctuates a little bit more, but none of this money will be going to that. All of those fees are currently in monthly service fees. Question from Carl?
In the category of rumor mills, what's the story going around about New York State slowing down the bond or borrowing money?
Yeah, so there's no rumor there. That's a fact. So right now we are at the point that we now have just about all of the approvals that we need in hand. The village is approved. The county planning board's done. The CRC will be approving next Wednesday. We had a public hearing Monday that went swimmingly. So all of our I's and our dotted and our T's are crossed. Our application is in to the Department of Financial Services and the Department of Health, but until they approve it, we can't borrow the money. So we're not going to be breaking ground. We're not spending any direct costs or anything before that happens. The Department of Financial Services and Department of Health right now are distracted by everything that's going on with the Amsterdam. That is obviously their bigger problem right now than any of the rest of us peons. So while they get that sorted out and recover from their reputational damage that happened as a result of what occurred with the Amsterdam, they're kind of underground right now. So how long that's going to take to suss out, I don't know. We currently have not changed our timelines, but as we get additional information, We will be obviously keeping everybody apprised of that. It's not a question of whether or not the financing will happen. It's a matter of when it will happen. Because the financing is compliant with all of the regs and everything. So it's just a matter of when they get to it. So there is a CCRC in Buffalo called Fox Run that put their application in 6 months ahead of us, and they still have not been approved. They have very expensive lawyers pushing DOH and DFS, and we have asked, should we jump on that too? And the answer so far is that no, they're going to let this battle be fought with them, and then we'll see if we can ride on the coattails. But I'm pushing them. I have an excellent relationship with both DFS and DOH, and I'm hoping that's going to work in our favor. But the issue with the Amsterdam has absolutely kind of pushed them underground for right now. We'll go to Joanne and then Betsy.
Yeah, Michelle, could you just explain about the Amsterdam for people who don't remember or don't know what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'll give a 1-minute version on what happened with the Amsterdam. So the Amsterdam is a CCRC in Long Island that came online 6 months or so before Woodland Pond did. They had 3 times the debt per unit that we had when we opened. So we had roughly $200,000 per unit of debt. They had 600,000-ish, just use that, whatever it was 3 times the amount of debt we had per unit. They have filed bankruptcy 3 times since 2007. And the first 2 times that they filed bankruptcy, the bankruptcy court was okay with them restructuring their debt. The bondholders were willing to do that. Essentially what those bankruptcies resulted in were just changes in their refinancing terms. So basically the bondholders agreed to either write off some principal or extend the repayment period. That was the first 2 bankruptcies. By the time they got to the 3rd bankruptcy, the bankruptcy court said, we've got a major problem here. Something is going on with the Amsterdam because we've allowed you to restructure your debt twice now in 10 years or 13 years, and you haven't made any gains on it. So when they came back to the bankruptcy court this last time, which was about 2 years ago, 18 months ago, the bankruptcy court said, we don't have confidence in you as an operator. You need to find a different operator. So they went out to the market. There was one operator that was willing to come in and deal with the ridiculous regulations in New York State. They were willing to keep the residents whole, keep the health centers open, keep the refunds intact, but they were a for-profit entity. And in New York State, the regulations that we are currently operating under do not allow for-profit operators. So on a technicality, the state refused that. I think they thought that there was going to be another one kind of coming up that was a not-for-profit, but that never materialized. So there is a buyer now that has purchased the Amsterdam. That deal has closed, but they will not be running it as a CCRC anymore. The residents will remain there if they want to, but it'll be a fee-for-service rental community. They have sold off the portions of the health center, and the refunds are not intact. So there's a lot of blaming going on between the Department of Health and Department of Financial Services, the former management of the Amsterdam, the current management of the Amsterdam. There's been tons of articles about it, but the sentiment generally among our industry is that somehow New York State should have figured this out. They should have figured out some way legally to let this happen, to let that for-profit operator come in because the residents were going to be kept whole, and they didn't. So we're all pretty pissed off about it, but they technically were correct. So it's a really bad circumstance. But at any rate, so right now that's what they're recovering from. I just want to go on and just look at the last page for a second, and I'll hold over for anybody that has questions. This page has not changed. This page we put together to kind of explain, first of all, the reason we're looking at the bigger project, which we didn't really get into today, which is okay. But I think a lot of you know this. Again, it hasn't changed. So the sections off to this side of the page, how do our financial metrics improve with expansion? You can read that for yourself. What monthly service fees look like with and without expansion, what cash looks like with and without expansion, what our land looks like. This was just a couple of the metrics. We've got tons of them that we could present, but we thought these would be the most interesting. So needless to say, with expansion, which is not the renovation we're talking about now, the project and the community strengthens financially. when we do the expansion and we create the additional revenue generating units, which is more ILUs, independent living units, that is when currently we can afford the new PAC, the new art studio, the new dining verandas, the renovation of this room to the multi-purpose gym with a convertible pickleball court, skilled nursing, memory care, assisted living, and the IL corridors. So we do not have the debt capacity now to do everything in this box. But as we've talked about, there are opportunities to accelerate some of those projects to the extent that we can find alternate funding sources. This is not a meeting about a possible capital campaign. We don't need to go into those level of details, but there are projects that are right now slated for 2028 that could happen sooner, and would be more cost effective for us to do this now if we are able to find other ways to pay for them. So that's what that page is, Mr. LaPerche. I think Yakov has a question. And Betsy, I'm done with my part of the presentation. If you wanted to stay for 5 more minutes for questions, we can do that. And then I'll hold over for anybody that has anything further.
If you had these projects accelerated or made earlier, will that result any savings in the construction, other areas? Will there be a
Yes.
savings?
So let's use, for example, and we talked about this a lot. Let's use the PAC as an example. Right now, it's anticipated that the new PAC, which is going to be constructed out front of the building, is roughly going to be $4 million. Let's say we were able to find a lottery ticket or somebody that wanted to give us $4 million for that. That means that we could start the PAC today while the construction team is already mobilized, because that project could happen simultaneously to everything else because it impacts nothing. They'd already be mobilized, which is cheaper. It's 3 years earlier, which is cheaper because things only get more expensive as time goes on. And most importantly, we don't have to borrow for that money. So if our borrowing was going to be a total of 100 million, it's now 96. So there's interest savings, direct interest savings, there's the cost of time, and there's the mobilization efficiency. So yes, absolutely. To the extent that we can do any of these sooner with other sources of funding, it's cheaper.
The savings there are like really pretty extraordinary. I was looking at just the cost of the architects doing their construction admin and the additional oversight by the CM, a construction manager, and it's in the hundreds of thousands before we even talk about increase in construction costs and financing and so on. So it's a lot of money.
What date do you anticipate starting this beginning project?
So currently, if everything hits, it contemplates a June 1st break ground. I think it's more realistic that this is probably going to be closer to August because of the issues with DOH and DFS. But currently, we have not changed our schedules, and we're currently charging forward as if it's going to be June 1st. All right, let's wrap up. I hope that you all learned something today. And if you have any additional questions, you know how to get in touch with me. And then we'll see you in 3 months for this same meeting, okay? Oh, thank you. The questions are good. They're very helpful.
Your tenacity that you
Yeah, there's a lot of history.
If you get state approval, can you